I recently made a documentary film called Nomad. This film is about my brother, who has chosen a very alternative lifestyle path. His YouTube channel is Nomad Sam, and I'll link it below. And I thought it would be nice to share a little bit of the reason of why we wanted to make it, how we made it, and to kind of give a little bit of an insight into the behind the scenes process of a film like this. So what is Nomad? Nomad is a 45-minute documentary about my brother. And it's really an exploration of his day-to-day. And I like to think of it as showing the subtle consequences of systemic and societal problems that mean living like this feels more comfortable or more appropriate for certain people. And there's so many different reasons. We're already seeing, by posting the trailer online, it's caught the attention of a lot of people, and it's kind of gone viral, I guess. And people just seem to really resonate with his story. They seem to resonate with the elements of the aspects of why he's living like he's living and his perspective on life. And yeah, it feels very much like it's in the zeitgeist of the times. It feels very much like people want to connect with nature. I think that people, to some degree, are dissatisfied with aspects of society, and these kind of radical alternative lifestyles, they seem pretty appealing. And I thought that would be a really interesting subject for a documentary, so people could get a bit of an insight into that lifestyle choice and kind of what it takes to live like that and what the day-to-day looks like, particularly in the case of Sam. So why did I want to make this film? Well, for a start, I'm just incredibly curious. I think that I've watched him go through this lifestyle, and being a massive nature lover myself, I've seen his deep connection to the outside world, and I've been curious about what that means and what that does to your mind, and how you can live like that in the modern age. Like what are the tools we need? What's the mindset we need? How many of our conveniences and comfortabilities do we need to sacrifice to live like that? And I think that it makes for a super interesting story. I think that there are a lot of people out there that really idolize this way of living and maybe don't fully understand kind of the implications of a life like this. And I think observing those subtleties gives us an opportunity to really feel where we might sit on that spectrum of wanting to live this radically alternative lifestyle and then living more traditionally, more conventionally in modern society as we know it. So yeah, there's lots of little aspects of his life that maybe people want to know a bit more about, or kind of get an insight into his perspective on the world. And all of these things are included in the documentary. But even with that being said, there's so much more that I wanted to explore. There's so many more questions that I wanted to ask, and so many more aspects about his life that I wanted to get into. So I think that we're probably going to make more of these and get into a bit of a rhythm, exploring the themes that run through his life. I personally am going through a bit of a career shift. I've worked in film for well over 10 years now in the commercial industry, and I really wanted to find more depth in the stories that I was telling, rather than just using these skill sets that I've learned to sell more things to people. I want to use them to actually tell stories that I care about, stories that I think will have a positive impact on the planet, or will have a positive impact on someone's life, or will help people understand a particular way of connecting to nature or connecting to themselves more deeply. This is really at the core of what I want to do with my work. And Nomad just felt like an amazing opportunity to do that. I really compare my brother quite often to a Zen master. The amount of time that he's spent in nature, the amount of time he spent in quiet solitude, I think has given him this incredible ability to break down highly complex topics and sentiments about, be it what it is to be human or what it is to be in nature. And he's able to just break them down into very simple to understand and digestible phrases and sentences. And I just think every time he says something, I'm like, yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I just really feel it. And it's always so simple and so to the point. But this is really at the heart of Zen, the simplicity of life. And I think his lifestyle also really embodies that. And I've tried to bring an element of that simplicity into the storytelling, into the film, where we are just with him as he goes about his usual daily routines, and he talks about what it means to live out there, and touches on kind of some of the reasons that he's chosen to live like that. And I think for future episodes, there's so many different avenues we could take it down. But I think for this first one, the real key was simplicity and a really relatable story. That's what I really wanted to bring home. This very simple story of connecting to nature, being with yourself. There's kind of this element of friendship with Ayana, with his dog, and I just think these are very, very relatable aspects of the human condition. And I really wanted that to come through and speak in a kind of meditative and almost like transcendent way, where a lot of the scenes are quite slow. There's lots of sound design, which I'm using to bring people into the atmosphere of his world, which is slow and it is quiet and it is full of these rich natural sounds. And so that was kind of one of the fundamental storytelling principles that I wanted to inject into this. And like I said, like I didn't ask half as many questions as I wanted to. And I think there's an opportunity for that with making more of these. Another storytelling element that I've used quite heavily in the film is this sort of analog film emulation feel, which in itself as an aesthetic gives quite a nostalgic, warm feeling, almost like family memories on an old camera kind of vibe. And one of the reasons for this was that I think as a society we have this inherent disconnect to nature, and I almost wanted to make this piece feel in itself quite nostalgic, quite warm, quite appealing in that sense of like, it makes the viewer want to go back to that place. It instigates a deep yearning to connect to nature. And by using these kind of analog emulation techniques with the colors and with the way that I shot it, the lens and whatnot, it makes it feel like an archival piece of better times gone by. And I think that this has such an evocative and powerful way of bringing you into the story, and hopefully the intention with it is to make people connect more deeply with the nature and the natural world that he is in. I also tried to keep the whole approach quite candid. There's a style of documentary filmmaking called verite, which is where you are just collecting footage of something without interacting with the subject too much. Now, obviously, that changed a little bit because he's my brother and I wanted to ask questions about his life and about his perspective on life and his living situation, you know, both the practical elements of it and the more emotional aspects. But I also wanted to just capture what he was doing in a really naturalistic way and show the honesty and the rawness of how he lives in his day-to-day, because I think that's what people really want to see. It's clear from his YouTube channel that people are really interested in what almost feels mundane, but actually there's something I think quite special and quite meditative in that mundanity. It's like these little actions that we do every day that almost feel ritualistic and help us connect to the present moment, particularly when we are in nature and we are doing these things while we're listening to all of these natural sounds. And the prompts that I gave him were an attempt to understand his perspective on the world. Obviously, I wanted to communicate a little bit about his history, but really I wanted to kind of get into his head about how it felt moment to moment to live like he does, because I think that's often a perspective that we don't get given with these quite alternative ways of living. So yeah, the approach on the actual shoot days was pretty simple. I just wanted to be with him as he did everything that he usually did. I knew that this particular time that I was going to spend with him, he would be making an attempt to move to another place, and I thought that might be quite a good storyline to kind of give the documentary a little bit of an arc, a little bit of a journey, rather than just staying in one position. So I did intentionally time it with that point. And yeah, as you'll see in the documentary, interestingly, he had these experiences and it didn't quite work out and in the way that he'd hoped. And I think there's just so much messaging in that, because it is really difficult living like he does. And I think it was hard to see it be so difficult in that particular time. But also, again, it was amazing to see him react in the way that he did, still very upbeat and open-minded about the whole situation. I had a selection of questions, and to be honest, not too much of a plan with those questions. I definitely banked on the fact that we were brothers and there was already this established relationship there between us. But I think if there's anything that I've learned, it's to not rely on that as a kind of definitive storyline. Even though the piece works really well, I think there are still elements where, due to the circumstances that you're in, you still can't quite reach the depths that you might want to in terms of storytelling. So that was a big learning for me, actually, and something that I would kind of approach slightly differently the next time. How, I still don't really know. And with that being said, the film does have quite an emergent quality to it, where even things that I didn't expect to happen happened, and conversations happened that I didn't expect to happen. So it's funny, as a filmmaker, you have all of these intentions about where you might want to take the story or the core elements that you want to communicate into the world. But with this style of documentary filmmaking, you're almost always pulled in all sorts of different ways, and there are tangential things happening moment to moment, and you just need to pick one and capture that properly in its fullest, and try to weave some sort of story with it in the post-production. So it's a really interesting process, and I guess also because he's my brother, those emergent elements were kind of even more dynamic, whereas our conversation could swing from one way, from one subject matter to the other very quickly, and we could be laughing or like having a deep conversation second to second, which I think it makes for a very kind of, for at least the people making it, a very interesting and human experience. And I do think this is conveyed in it. I feel like you're kind of journeying along with him as a friend, which really is all I was doing as well. And I think that comes through, which I really like, that casual approach. So I shot this film across 7 days, and I spent that whole time with him, but I didn't stay with him. I actually camped in a campsite not too far away. I didn't want to affect too much the way that he was living by setting up camp next to him. I shot the whole thing on a very small camera. I'll put a picture of it up now, but I just generally wanted to be able to be quite dynamic and quite on the fly and reactive to everything that was happening. Again, those emergent elements of the film can only be captured properly if you're able to respond to them in real time. And so I had a very small camera and a microphone on the camera, and I also mic'd him up quite regretfully because I didn't actually use any of the audio from that microphone, and I don't actually like seeing it in the finished film. You don't see it that much, but I was just like, oh, it kind of like breaks down the world that he lives in. It kind of gives the technical production elements a bit too much of a presence in some of the scenes. But you know, you win some, you lose some, and I definitely learnt that about this approach, because all the audio is taken from the microphone on the camera that I used, which is a beautiful directional microphone, and as long as I was pointing it in the right direction, then you were able to hear what he was saying. It really was an incredible process to make something like this about a family member. I've always been so curious about the way that he lives, and I just think it's such an important story to tell. It's clear to see that a lot of people resonate with him and the way he lives and his story and his attitude and perspective on life. And I think I couldn't think of a more wholesome film to make and to put out into the world. I think the whole being his brother as the director of the film element, I've tried to make that feel quite obvious, where there are a few scenes. There's one scene where I'm obviously joining him to eat something, and I actually really enjoyed putting that in there. That was totally unexpected, but I think it adds another dimension to the piece, and I think it might be something to experiment with a bit more moving forward, because ultimately I am his brother, and that dynamic exists, and I think it's part of the reason that the documentary feels so organic and feels so intimate, that we're able to reach that level of depth together. And that feels important to me. That feels really important, and it feels like a very fulfilling and rewarding part of this process of making this film. There are a few other points at which you kind of see a shadow of me, or you hear my voice, or you get a sense of me being there, and those are quite intentional, really. The traditional format of the crew completely feeling like they're not there, I think it felt a bit obsolete for this, again, because I'm his brother, because we're related, because that relationship is pre-existing and an important part of the way that this story is communicated out into the world. Obviously, there's so many amazing themes around his story: happiness, fulfillment, neurodivergence, mental health, systemic issues, nature connection. All of these things, and so much more, are clearly things that people resonate with deeply. And I love that, and I'd love to have the opportunity to explore those more deeply in future films that we make together. But I think one aspect that makes this film so special is it is just two friends out in nature having fun and talking about life. It's a very real and relatable scenario. And if there's anything that I want to put out into the world, it's that. It's go and do that. This might be a particularly unique way of doing that due to mine and Sam's circumstances, but I think it really encourages you to just go out and connect with nature, be with your friends, be with people that are important in your lives, and spend time with them in nature, and connect with nature in all sorts of ways, listening to the rich tapestry of sound that is always present there, or hiking up a mountain, or going and camping somewhere, or foraging some food. Learning about how to sustain yourself off the land, even at a very low level, can be so rewarding and help you cultivate this relationship to the natural world. And I personally think that is one of the most important messages that we can communicate into the world. More people need to be doing that. We need more of that in our lives. There is a huge inherent disconnect in society that we have with nature, and I really just want to encourage people to go and explore and go and connect to nature, because it does so much for us physiologically, emotionally, societally. It's just so powerful, and I really believe in the transformational qualities that it brings. And that is really so at the core of this film. I hope this has been insightful and interesting. Enjoy watching the film. Let us know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear any and all feedback. It's all really welcome. And I'll see you in the next one.